Alright, this is the second video today. I took a little trip. I got a ride. I did not drive. I got a ride, took a trip, and went to Pennsylvania, and I tracked down Amos Miller and had a chit chat with him and got some things sorted out, and I offered him my assistance if he ever needed it again. And as you guys know, I like I like bees, and I'm gonna get back into bees. I was gonna get back into bees this year, but some things happened financially, and I was not going to stick my neck out, because that starting in, the thing is that yeah, I don't have any. I have a couple of bee suits, and I got some bee tools and all that sort of stuff. But the thing is that when you're kind of getting back into something, so you got to kind of starting all over, not from ground zero, but from a point, and none of that stuff is cheap to get into. Beehives are not the cheapest thing to get into. There's still a lot of knowledge back in the gray matter there. For me studying and working around bees, here and there throughout my life. I can remember one time that I knew a fellow who was a beekeeper, and I was off on a job, out in the middle of hinterland, and I got to talking with this fella, and he was a buddy of mine, but I didn't know that he was a beekeeper also. I said, man, sometimes we're out in these different places for a very long time. What do you do with those bees when you're gone? About inspections and this and that. And he says they're bees. He says they can take care of themselves. So I'm not worried about doing inspections and whatnot while I'm gone. Yeah. And I thought, he really has a point. Bees don't need a whole lot. You can come upon a swarm of bees living in a tree in a wood. Nobody's out there checking on them. Just living. They're doing their thing. They're doing their thing. So, because before that, I had, because I've always had I always had a mild interest, even back in like 1980, in bees and how they live and how we get honey and this and that, and I was studying up on Africanized bees back then, and I'm a man of many talents, a man of many interests and hobbies. Because you can do things for money. You can work for money. You could be a mercenary, or you could be, you could work for a government, or you could do anything. You could be a guy that drives a bulldozer all day. That maybe you love playing with mechanical. Maybe Tonka Toys was your favorite. The big metal trucks. Maybe that was your main interest when you were a child, and then when you grew up, you just wanted to run a bulldozer or something. Crane. Maybe that was your whole dream, to be a crane operator. Everybody can and does do things to get money to. They need a livelihood to live, right? But outside of that, you have a life. You have another life. You have a life where you have hobbies. Some people are avid readers. and some people, they focus in on one genre of books. You know, like some people I've known, they only read mystery books because that intrigues them. You know, some people will read detective novels or something. You know, or some people will be avid gardeners. Uh, Not necessarily food, but maybe for flowers to make things look nice, or you know, landscape type things. But everybody has their hobbies, you know, outside of their normal scope of making a living. And one of my hobbies was always bees, you know, because bees, you know, we eat because of bees, you know, mostly. Uh, and I've learned a lot about bees. You know, bees can't see red. I never understood why, you know, there weren't more red bee suits. You know, because bees, their visual spectrum that they see on is red. They don't see red. Okay, so I never understood why there weren't more red bee suits. Yeah, they use white because white's supposed to be calming, you know, and the darker colors are supposed to hack them off, you know. And there is some truth to that too, because in Africa, the beekeepers, uh, you know, a lot of times they'll work a hive uh, for some reason at night, and they use red lights. Okay, I don't, you know, and then you got, you know, but they're wearing a white suit. But with the African bees, not Africanized bees, but African bees, it's probably the same with Africanized bees that you know, they intermixed their breeds in Brazil years ago. But in Africa, uh, you know, they try not to use a dark veil, even though they're protected. Instead of using a black veil, you know, a screen in their hood, they will use a white one, or a very light colored one, because if they do one that's black, they won't be able to see anything because the bees cover it because they're hacked off. So I mean, it's very interesting to me, you know, that these color schemes will cause bees to behave in a certain manner. But you know, the reason why I studied a lot about aggressive bees, because aggressive bees have less problems. They have they just they don't have the mite problems. They don't have the beetle infestation problems. They don't have a lot of that stuff because they're aggressive, and because they take care of their colony. They're super aggressive. Not good for around animals and kids, obviously, if you have them. But if you kept them and you kept them away from people, you know, that's really the best kind of bees to have is African bees are the best. Uh, if you know, if there's anything in there, in that hive, they get it out and they kill it. And the guard bees in an African colony, the guard bees, because they're more primitive, you know, I mean, this is we're getting back to the more primitive stuff here. They, you know, they're more aggressive, and instead of just a few guard bees at the entrance, you know, they'll have a number of guard bees, but then the interesting thing about African bees, and I think it might even be the same with Africanized bees, is that they will recruit other members of the colony to become guard bees if they think that there's a big enough threat. Okay, so that's the difference between, like, say, Italian honeybees and African bees. Italian bees will be like, well, there might be a threat out there. I guess we could do something about it, maybe. And then they'll fly out, bzzz, do their little thing, but they won't recruit anybody. They'll just go out and see if they can handle it, and if they can't, they'll probably bolt back to the hive, But those African bees, they'll recruit other members of the colony. They'll say, okay, you're all now guard bees with us. Let's go. They recruit and then they leave. They go in they're kind of like the militia. You recruit them up, and then boom, take care of business, right? Yeah. I don't even know where I was going with this video. I forgot. I'm just talking. But anyway, oh yeah, so I decided there's a few big bee suppliers in the United States, and I went to one of them. It was one of their quote unquote flagship stores. They have a bunch of distributors also around the country, but it was one of their big stores owned by the actual company, not a distributor. And I thought, man, this has got to be like a beekeeper's super center. It's got to be like, they've got to have like everything, right? And I went in there. I'm not gonna mention the location, but it was it was it was Man Lake, and I went there and I was disappointed. It looked kind of like some places that I've seen where they're trying to piecemeal together a store in another third world country or a poorer country, and you would expect this is not a distributor. I'm trying to make that clear. This is one of the stores, and I went there and it was kind of like books on beekeeping were like there was maybe 10. And they were just here and there on some crappy little shelves, and stuff was not really very well organized, and I don't know, I just was not impressed with it at all. I was unhappy. I thought about going to this other beekeeping supply, one of their main stores, which I have done business with them. Not their store, but the company. The company treated me really well. I had an issue with one thing, and they were like, boom, here's a pickup, and we're going to send you another one. We're gonna go to the factory where these are made, and we're gonna see why this happened. So, and that company was Dadent and Sons, and I recommend Dadent to anybody, because their stuff's really good. It's an old company, 1800s, many generations. Yeah. So, yeah, I went there, didn't buy anything. I was disappointed. I thought maybe I would be able to see, because I'm trying to catch up. Been trying to catch up my knowledge on beekeeping so I can get back started again. I'm gonna go ahead now that I'm financially okay again. I'm gonna look at getting my hives and stuff ready for this next year. So between now and next spring, if I'm not raptured out of this world or something happens to me, I'll be business as usual with my growing my vegetables and whatnot. And I'm gonna start working on hive stuff and swarm stuff and get that ready for the next year. That'll be 2026. If the world doesn't come to an end before then, you know. So we're living in the last days, really. I don't think the Amish really are quite sure that we are. You know, they don't have a strong connection to Jesus, believe it or not. Yeah, they're Christians. They believe in Jesus. But they don't have that. There's something not quite right there. You know, you know, maybe one day I'll have a chance to sit down and talk to them about that. But yeah, yep. So bee stuff is also on the agenda yet. So anyway, that was my experience with that situation. Guess that's it for now, guys. If you have questions or whatever, drop me a line. You know, I had a couple questions here a week or so ago, and I answered their questions, and people are got some things sorted out, and now they're happy. So yeah, I guess I'll be talking to you soon. Catch you later.